my name's Jade and today we'll be talking about Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. This is another book that I read for school. I read it earlier this year. It takes place over a variety of different time periods. I don't really want to tell you much about that though. The main one being World War I. If you want to put it down to its bare bones, it is a war novel. In my personal perspective, it tells us about life and how life can be affected by different aspects of the world and different things that will happen to us in our life whether we choose them or not. It's got a little bit of romance in there. I really like this one as well. I don't know if I could say that I liked it as much as Tone, but it definitely comes very, very close. I would give it like a 7.58 out of 10. So roughly the same as I gave Tone in terms of like an 8 out of 10. However, I still think that I like Tone a little bit more. This one is another post-memory text. I cried multiple times reading this. There's a list. I felt very passionately for some of the characters in this. I've only actually gone through part 1 in class, so I don't know the other parts as well as I know part 1 per se in terms of like breaking them down and everything. I'm definitely more familiar with part 1. But I have read the book, so I do know what happens and I can talk about it. I'm going to get into the spoilery section now, so if you have yet to read Birdsong, I recommend you leave so I don't spoil you. You can read it for yourself and find out everything that happens and have your own emotions and thoughts and opinions about it. If you have yet to read Birdsong, please leave so I don't ruin it for you. I'm going to start with my favourite things about it. My favourite character was Stephen, by far. I also liked Weir. That upset me. Let me go through the list of times that I cried actually. I cried when Isabel left Stephen. Lots of thoughts and emotions about that. I was so mad at her. I was so mad. I didn't see why or how. First of all, how could you do that to him? Second of all, like, why would you? What? Why? Why would you do that? I had time and I guess I'm not as mad about it now, but I'm still mad. The whole Jack's son situation, that for some reason really touched me. When Stephen said he didn't have any children. Got shot. I was so worried that he was gonna die. I was sad about Weir. Sad about Stephen is what I've written. Nothing's coming to mind instantly. When was Weir sad about Stephen? The letters? The fight? I'm assuming like the war. The conversation he had with Isabel. The letter from Jean, right? And Weir's death. I really very liked part 1. It's probably my favourite part. If I had to like pick a favourite part, I really liked part 1. Very similarly to the way I liked part 1 from Atonement. It's kind of the calm before the storm. I really liked Stephen and Isabel together. Didn't necessarily like Isabel though, and so that worried me because I liked Stephen because I almost immediately felt sorry for him. It's a big thing that he's an outsider. It's a big part of his character. He doesn't fit in anywhere, ever. Always an outsider. He's very cold and well, not cold, but he's very precise, he's very abrupt, he's very particular and organised and quite defensive. He doesn't tell people about him for a while. Someone made a point about how we don't get to know the characters until much later. We kind of meet them, we spend a while with them, and then we get to know them. Isabel, we didn't find out the whole backstory with her sister and the crush she had. And then Stephen, with his whole backstory, you know, the birds and how he never met his parents and those kinds of things. And so in that sense you could say you don't really know the character until kind of you leave them until it's too late. I kind of don't know how I feel about that because yeah, that's true, strictly speaking you don't get to know about them until much later on. However, he's very good at telling us about them in other ways, like their personality for instance. From the beginning I had, you know, the inkling that Stephen doesn't feel comfortable around a lot of people, he doesn't fit in. I mean, obviously it's obvious that he's an outsider through his writing, but Stephen, I just had the impression of a man who never really had loved ones. That was my immediate impression of him, and that's what happened. That's what had happened to him. It was right. Sebastian kind of weaves into their characteristics and weaves into the way he describes the characters, and so you do know them without knowing that you know them, if that makes sense. I would argue that you do know the characters very early on because of how particular he is with their descriptions. So I always sympathised with Stephen, I always felt sorry for him, and that kind of, you know, made me like him. I feel like deep down he's a very sweet person. There are some moments where he shows real kindness and I love him for it. And he just gets kicked around constantly. He is that puppy that just gets kicked around constantly and you're just like, no, leave the puppy alone. That is Stephen. That is my summary of Stephen for you. You're welcome. I didn't necessarily like the relationship they had in terms of, we know it's not gonna last long. We know it's gonna be short-lived. It's all about the passion, it's all about the secrecy. It takes place in the Red Room. You know, danger, love, passion, danger, blood, and as soon as they're removed from that, it's not as passionate by far. The thing is, Stephen still loved her. When they left and they went off on their own, he was content. It was Isabel who was not, and that made me immediately be like, well, then why did you leave with him? Like, she needed to get out of that situation. I understand that she needed to get out of that situation. She was probably caught up in the moment. Still, you don't leave a man like that. That's not fair in any way, shape or form. It's interesting the whole bird thing, how he's scared of birds, and he would often hear birds singing after being with Isabel, foreshadowing of her not being trustworthy. In terms of the Isabel-Stephen sex scene, I thought it's interesting the way Isabel's obviously she's not like ancient, but she's older than Stephen. Stephen's kind of, you know, coming into manhood during this time. You know, he's coming into his own. The youth and the innocence is falling away. You know, I would argue that Isabel is doing so just as much as he is. She's never been in a relationship like she has with Stephen before. She fantasized about it when she was younger, but she got thrust upon as heir, and so she's never had that. She's coming into her own and developing just as much as he is. It's reflected through the way he describes her on page 59, I think. The Lex's choice represents that of her. That's what I got from it, at least. Again, outside was the sound of birds. Also, another thing I picked up from it, Isabel finally comes into her own. She's finally at peace with herself. You know, she says, I am at last what I am. That quote, by the way, is following us around everywhere. I am not what I am was in Othello, and then Robbie says I am what I am, and then here we go, I am at last what I am. It's following us around. It must be in Wuthering Heights. I refuse to believe that it's not in Wuthering Heights. Next time I read it, I'm going to check. I'm going to look for it. A key in the split lock of her flesh. There's a lot of talk about how, you know, she's coming into her own and she's finally finding out who she is, and you know, all that soppy stuff. I very much strongly got the sense that she was kind of using him, like, you know, use and abuse type situation. She guided him into her, like she's doing this to him, she's using him to get out of this situation with his heir, and then she's going to leave him. That's very much the sense that I got in here. I can't pick it up right now because I'm looking at this and I'm scribbled all over it and I've not written clearly where any of this is. Very interesting that that's the feelings I always have while reading it, and then obviously in the larger scale that's essentially what happens. And then we have the war. I like the war sections. I thought they were interesting. I like reading about war. The war is one of those things that I feel like interests a lot of people. I don't know why. It's a history thing, I feel like. I thought the war passages were interesting because of the war and because of seeing what was happening to Stephen and seeing the growth and development in him. It's been a criticism that we don't know Stephen and that he's not a well-developed character. Chrissy and I have this full explanation of why it's a good thing that he's not explained. Can't remember it for the life of me though, can I? We had it in class and it was brilliant, and I must have wrote it down. If I didn't write it down, I'm going to kick myself. There are a couple explanations that I can come up with you for now. One of them, if you're looking at it from the war perspective of this being a war novel, you know, post-memory text that's relating what happened during the war and trying to put ourselves in that mind zone, by making Stephen, you know, not knowing him as well. By doing that, he's a clean slate, so anyone can relate to him, anyone can impose themselves onto him, and you can put yourself in the situation of the war. It's also like an Owen kind of technique. Wilfred Owen would kind of make it so that you can see everybody's perspective, would write it so that everybody's say came through and that you can imagine yourself there. Chrissy also came up with some good points. Again, can't remember them though, can I? Of course not. When would I ever remember anything when it's useful? I think it's interesting the contrast between Stephen and his environment in the beginning. He's very much, you know, cold and precise and an outsider, while his surroundings are chaotic and fragmented. They're a mixture of things. As the war goes through, he becomes more fragmented. He kind of starts to go a little. His mind isn't as sharp as what it once was. It kind of deteriorates. In the beginning, he's so precise, and when Firebrace comes to see him, because Stephen told him to, Stephen has no recollection at all of asking Firebrace to come to him. Doesn't remember it at all. And before, that is something that Stephen, he would never do that. The whole superstition thing in the cards, that's something that before Stephen would never do. It opens the debate of, does he actually believe it though? Is he just doing it, you know, for funsies, for weird's sake, for hope's sake, just in case it's not going to hurt? Or is he actually starting to buy into it and his character is changing and developing in a way that I wouldn't have expected it to, due to the circumstances of war and Isabel leaving him? But during the war, he becomes more fragmented and his surroundings become more controlled. You know, they're in a war situation, and so there's planned attacks and orders being given. It kind of neutralizes the fragmentation a bit because they're all put under the same circumstance. Okay. Elizabeth. Is that her name? It is Elizabeth, right? And so we go from war in France in like, what, 1916 to England in the 1978. It's very jarring. It's very, you know, bam, in your face. It mimics the way soldiers feel when they would come out of war. Could not stand her. There's one thing that me and my friends say all the time. It's kind of, I don't know how relevant it is. I'm not sure. We're kind of going at it like it's irrelevant, like really girly, you know, gossipy way. He's with this guy who's they're having this affair, right? Because this guy's married, he has kids. They never leave their wives. It's not gonna happen. He's not gonna leave his wife for you. He's gonna try and get it to work for the kids. Whatever's gonna happen, it's not going to happen. I don't care if you just had a kid with him. I still put my money down that it's not gonna happen. So mad at her. It's annoying that like this is what Stephen's line, his family has come to. Ugh. And that guy, when that guy proposed to her, I wanted her to say yes. She needed someone who would like take control because she didn't have a clue what she was doing. I'm not sure how I feel about the Elizabeth parts. I'm not sure how I think they fit in. I think again it's the effects of war and what it does to family. Putting it in perspective. Oh, that part when they were stuck underground was the most stressful thing to read. There's a lot of graphicness. There's a lot of graphicness during the war, and then we have Elizabeth's birth, Isabel, and Stephen's sex scene. That's kind of one of the constants that kind of connects all of the different storylines together. I really liked Jean, and I really liked how he finally was with someone that could like appreciate him for who he was. When Stephen would describe Jean, you know, he said that she was beautiful and light came into her face and that her smile wasn't like blood like Isabel's was, or something to that effect. I was rooting for him. I think that is all. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it, and I've been having a lot of fun in class going through it and breaking it down. In terms of like school and class, when in doubt, fragmentation. You're good to go. I'm gonna leave a link to the song I'm gonna choose down below. I have no idea what I choose right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a super morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye. But as I was saying, I didn't necessarily say I just got lipstick on it. Great. I'm getting lipstick everywhere. Great. How sorry the great, just casually chilling in there.